Hi, this is Julie at the.world.or.nothing. For the last few weeks, I've been posting these videos that are usually under 30 minutes, and they're supposed to be drawing warm-up videos or timed figure drawing poses. But to be honest, I believe that for myself, my studies usually take longer than 30 minutes, at least good studies. So today I'm trying something different, and I brought for us a longer process video. The overall time that I spent on this one reference study was about 2 hours and 45 minutes. For your sake, don't worry, I will focus on the most crucial parts, and then I will speed up the sections of the footage that I'm just, working or focused or noodling around even. But I invite you to join me if you'd like to. I know that studying usually evokes a negative feeling in most people, for myself at least. But I'm trying to keep it fun. So instead of a usual model with a studio setup, I brought for us a screenshot of Ahsoka Tano from the online trailer. I'm really enjoying this series, but I also really like the reference because just part of her face is being directly lit by the sun, by this cool light, and then the other part of her body is in shadow, but not too dark. And I'll really stick to the reference this time around because I want to focus on the basics, understanding value and color, and learn as much as I can from the source material. To be honest, I struggled more than I expected with her character, actually, because this is, the actress is all set up like an alien. So there's a lot of information, especially on her headpiece and her anatomy. But the way that I went about this was I took my time observing the image. I started by drawing these basic shapes, a circle, and triangles, and giving myself some guidelines. And even though in the beginning is not very precise, at least I had something to start with. So I just kept refining it, erasing, and erase as little as you can because you do want to grow your confidence. That's something that I'm really trying to stick to not erase, to not undo, and commit to the strokes that I'm putting down on the canvas. I also recommend starting with a larger brush stroke because then, for me at least, it helps me focus on the larger shapes that I'm looking at instead of going straight into detail. And once I'm comfortable with that, I will lower the opacity of this draft layer, create a new layer on top, and then with a smaller brush, go about working on the eyes and the nose and the mouth. For me, I really fixate on these features, and I think most people do as well. And just to make sure that I got them more or less right at the beginning will really help me later on. I was really trying my best here, trying to be careful and accurate because normally I've noticed that my work is not very precise when I'm looking at the features. So this time I really took my time with it. I see now that I'm recording this voiceover that there's a lot of things in the sketch that were not quite right, especially around her headpiece and the proportion of her forehead and it's a sort of tiara crown thing that she's wearing. It's not quite right. Those are things that luckily I noticed in later stages of the process that I believe I managed to address. But at this stage, the sketch is not quite solid. So if you're following along or trying by yourself, I recommend that you perhaps take a break, work on something else for a while, and then come back to it. Because if you give your mind this time to reset, you will be able to see it again with fresh eyes. I also want to mention that I didn't really do this all in one sitting. It's too much time, for me at least, to work basically 3 hours straight sitting down. I had to take some breaks, like every 20 minutes or so. And sometimes more often than not, while recording these YouTube videos, I work a little bit one day and then pick it up again the next. And if you have the time to do that, I also recommend, why not? Because then your study will become, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You know, it will become better for you and it's healthier, to be honest. I see now that I'm recording this voiceover that there's a lot of things in the sketch that were not quite right, especially around her headpiece and the proportion of her forehead and her, it's a sort of tiara crown thing that she's wearing. It's not quite right. Those are things that luckily I noticed in later stages of the process that I believe I managed to address. But at this stage, the sketch is not quite solid. So if you're following along or trying by yourself, I recommend that you perhaps take a break, work on something else for a while, and then come back to it. Because if you give your mind this time to reset, you will be able to see it again with fresh eyes. I also want to mention that I didn't really do this all in one sitting. It's too much time for me, at least, to work basically 3 hours straight sitting down. I had to take some breaks, like every 20 minutes or so. And sometimes, more often than not, while recording these YouTube videos, I work a little bit one day and then pick it up again the next. And if you have the time to do that, I also recommend, why not? Because then your study will become, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You know, it will become better for you and it's healthier, to be honest. But we all have different ways of working, so do whatever is best for you. After I laid down more or less the general shapes of the study, I started also adding in the darkest values that I identified in the image just to guide myself. Later I did paint these over, but for now it was a good way for me to recover some of that structure that I think was lacking on that sketch. This is the part of the video where I really sped up the footage because it took me a really long time to read and figure out the colors and the values. To get started, I just laid underneath on a new layer a base color. So let's say her skin is orange, her cape is this bluish gray, and I just needed one more or less solid color that I could use as a base. And from there on, work and refine and sculpt. Where are the values lighter? Where is that light coming from? Where are the darker tones? Where is some rim light? And that takes time, for me at least. I am still figuring out how to read colors, how to understand them. Another strategy, that I've been fond of ever since I heard it from a friend, is laying down the background colors, because a while ago, I would really just focus on the subject themselves and completely ignore the background. But that makes no sense, because when you're in a space, in a physical space, there's a lot of light all around you and color, and your surroundings will influence how that color is interacting with your subject. In a way, it bleeds through, which is very fascinating. I should not use such terms because I'm no expert, but this is how I look at it basically. And now you see that I tried being bold. I didn't use any multiply mode other than for the line art. The colors are really just more or less color picked, or I played with the color wheel and laid them down. And at times I tried being bold with them, so we know her skin is orange, right? But because of the light, the cool lighting, there's also some tones of purple and blue even, and yellow over there that will give that illusion of light. So that was my focus. It's a very rough stage at this moment. I noticed I really struggled as well reading those dark tones of her cloak. I wasn't very focused on her costume, to be honest, nor the background, but mostly on her face. That's where I rendered the most and spent more time on. And this is the part where I started playing with the smudge tool. I try not to rely too much on it because I think that if I use it too much, things become very messy and I lose the sharp edges that are so hard for me to work on. But now and then it was very nice to just blend the colors and give that nice transition between the surfaces of her face. From this stage onwards, I just keep repeating that process of adding and blending colors. I tried to be a bit careful. I was very careful during the entirety of this study about the intensity of the values. And I started lighter and tried to control myself not to go too dark too quickly, because it has been pointed out to me in the past that my paintings tend to be there are parts that are too bright and parts that are too dark usually, and then there's no in between. So that's the whole point of me trying to stay true to this picture, trying to teach myself that there's a whole range of values in between dark and bright that I can make use of and experiment with and grow from. I need to confess, I also had a lot of fun adding her stripes. That's such an Ahsoka signature, let's say. I also do want to take some time away from the technical descriptions and mention that I am loving this series. I am so happy that it exists because I actually got into Star Wars because of Clone Wars when I was a kid. I remember watching it on Cartoon Network and I was obsessed with Ahsoka, this really cool Jedi girl. And I remember just running to my brother and asking him, can I watch Star Wars? Because I knew he had the VHS at that time, or was it already the DVDs? I don't know. But because of Clone Wars, I got into Star Wars, because of Ahsoka especially. And I was really sad to find out, my 10-year-old heart, that she was not in the movies, the episodes 5, 6, the whole thing. So to finally see her in live action is so meaningful. I also just appreciate Rosario Dawson so much for doing this. It's such a big role, but she has all the charisma and, oh my god, the dedication. I love Ahsoka, such a great character. Especially this mature version that's not, because in the series she was her young self, she was very fun and very lighthearted, and yeah, it was a cartoon, so the humor was different. So to be able to transition into a live action that's a bit more serious, the character has been through a lot, but still retain that lovely personality. That's so great. I'm such a fan. I highly recommend if you haven't seen it yet, or even if you're new to Star Wars. It might be a lot to take in, but it's worthwhile. Also, look at this costume. I love that it's not CGI. I love that it's actually, makeup and craftsmanship, because it has this, you see it. The more I looked at this image, the more I worked on this reference and looking into the details and how the color reflects on her costume and her skin. You just appreciate it a whole lot more, because for the last 20 years, movies have really relied on CGI, and I have full respect for CGI artists, of course, but there's a certain quality to live action, to these physical things that's still really hard to capture otherwise. And it's lovely to see both worlds working together to make such beautiful cinematography. Cinematography? I guess that's the wrong term. Yeah, such beautiful work, let's call it. Now back to the piece, back to the description. At this stage, I was starting to see Rosario Dawson. Excuse me for mispronunciation, by the way. I was starting to see her in the image, and that's a very satisfying moment when you're working on a portrait. My last studies that I posted here on YouTube, I don't think I managed to capture the subjects. It was a shorter exercise, but now that there's more likeness, I feel very, very happy about it. That at least you look at her and you know, oh, this is Ahsoka. I'd also like to mention that I am still underneath the drawing layer. At some point I will move on top of that, but I tried to remain on one layer as much as I could, just because I wanted to make sure that before I started a paint over, things were as refined as they could be. It's a bit difficult to go into detail as to what exactly I'm doing, because most of the time I'm just trying to refine, trying to fix some problems that I identified. And I mentioned this before, but again, if I had had more of a structured, more of a solid drawing on those initial stages of the study, my life would have been a lot easier afterwards, and I wouldn't have had to use the lasso tool or paint some things over as I did. At some stage, and you'll see this in a bit, I just meshed all the layers together, and I used the lasso tool to select her headpiece and pull her forehead down because I overextended that a bit. It was not correct. And it took me so long to realize that, actually. It's almost at the end of the study phase, like solid 2 hours into this. So that's a lesson for the future. For the next time, I intend to take more time with that, really enjoy that drawing process and try to read the essence of the image before adding in color and the values in between bright and dark. Because yeah, it's not really nice to mix these. It is possible to save a painting, I think, but it's a much more enjoyable process for me if I have that figured out from the early stage on. If you see that it's going the right direction and it doesn't feel weird or anything. Something that I also want to work on in the future is just more expressive brushwork. I'm being very cautious here, very careful, trying to get all the values in, and it is a study, but hopefully by doing this, by repeating this with other references and maybe some simpler reference images, like just objects in a studio, hopefully I'll be able to develop more of a style and some confidence so that in the future studies like this or portraits like this will become proper work, like original work. That would be fun to add my own twist. But at this point, I'm satisfied with how this turned out. I could spend a lot more time refining it, fixing the issues that I mentioned before that are still not quite there. But I believe that now I've learned what I could learn from this reference picture, and I'm ready to move on to something else to continue to learn and improve. I hope that you enjoyed this format. It's a little bit different than what I've been working on so far. This, of course, was entirely rushed because otherwise the video would be extremely long. But I still hope that you enjoyed my company and that you're having fun with your own studies and that I managed to share something I learned with you. Do take care, and I'll see you soon for the next video next week. Bye!